In this video, you're going to get an introduction of a couple words that we tend to hear a lot with fats, but actually do apply to any organic compounds. The first two are saturated versus unsaturated. Now, we've already used this term in our solutions unit, and a saturated solution was one that is full of the solute, and an unsaturated one was one that could still hold more solute. However, we're not talking about solutions here, but the carbons. A saturated hydrocarbon, or a saturated any organic substance, is one in which the carbon atoms are holding as many hydrogens as they can. This means that there are going to be single bonds between the carbon atoms. If there's a double bond between the carbon atoms, then the carbons are holding less than the maximum amount of hydrogen atoms. Notice this is still a valid dot diagram and everything does obey the octet rule, but we could break one of those bonds between the carbon atoms and fit more hydrogens in here. So this would be considered unsaturated. So a substance where all of the carbon-carbon bonds are single bonds would be saturated, and a substance that has at least one double or triple bond would be considered unsaturated. Now, if we have an unsaturated substance with a double bond, there's actually two different ways that that can be arranged. When we have a single bond, the molecule can actually rotate around that single bond. But you can't rotate around a double bond. And if you make the model of the molecule, you'll notice that you can't rotate around the double bond, and that's true of the actual molecules themselves. So the two different ways that you can arrange those groups for a double bond are called cis and trans. Cis means that you have essentially the same group on the same side of the double bond, where trans you have it opposite. So for the cis substance here, we have yellow both above the double bond and green both below the double bond. Whereas over here, we have one yellow above and one yellow below the double bond, and one green above and one green below the double bond. Notice because you can't rotate around the double bond, you can't change from one to the other. So you're going to be reading an article that looks at saturated versus unsaturated and cis versus trans fats. So these are the basic pieces of information that you need to know in order to be able to understand that article.